I aimed my phone torch to the large gap in the fence. "Over here," I whispered to my friends. "There's a way in." We took turns squeezing through the narrow opening in the metal gate and began walking silently to the derelict building. From there, we managed to slip in through a broken window which previous explorers had gained access through. The inside was pitch black, with an expected damp, musty fragrance. Anglesfield Hospital had been abandoned for over 20 years, and the building had certainly seen better days. The three of us continued down the hallway, with only the lights from our phones illuminating our way. We explored every room we came across, finding a lot of satanic and lewd graffiti decorating the shedding walls. Millie didn't like that, but Harry assured her it was just other explorers messing around and to not be a wimp. Moving quickly and quietly, we found ourselves in a large room which appeared to be a ward. Some of the beds were overturned, and there were some filthy gowns strewn across the floor. I began walking around, stepping over fallen cubicle curtains when something caught my eye. A brown, leathery object slightly peeking out from under the mattress of one of the beds. I walk over to retrieve it, almost tripping on the curtain as I do so. It was a book. I go to open it, but Harry impatiently hurries us on to the next room. I place the book down on the bed and turn away, but I'm instantly drawn back to it, as if an invisible hand is guiding me to it, willing me to take it. I slip the book into my coat pocket, cursing my fucking curiosity. We soon found ourselves in some sort of office. Millie came across a dusty file cabinet filled with patient records. We began to curiously flick through them when Harry called out from a room down the corridor, forcing us to abandon our snooping. We reunite with Harry, who stood in front of an open fridge. "Look at this," he beckons. "What do you reckon's in here?" Millie held her nose as she approached. "Ugh, it stinks." I had to agree. An occupied sealed fridge that hasn't had power for decades certainly holds an odor. We shone our lights over the multiple opaque jars which inhabited the fridge, unable to see what, if anything, was in them. "Oh, Harry, just close it, it's disgusting," Millie whined. "I just want to see what's in here," Harry replied. "Maybe there's something at the back." Harry unexpectedly reached his hand in, causing Millie to squeal. "Are you insane? That's disgusting, now stop it." She poked Harry sharply in the ribs, causing him to recoil back and send a jar tumbling out of the fridge and onto the floor with a smash. A dark liquid splashed over him. We all aimed our torches down in unison, but before anyone could say a word, the smell hit us. Harry heaved, Millie screamed, and I began making a run for the exit, the others following not far behind. We dove out the broken window at inhuman speeds and began gulping the fresh air. "What was that? Was that a fucking brain?" Millie asked through breaths. "I don't know, but it stank. Why did you make me do that, you twat? That shit went in my mouth and eye and everywhere." Harry hissed at her, doubled over and looking rather pale. In the distance, we heard dogs barking. "Right, let's go," I announce as we all hastily retreat. It took about an hour for us all to get home. I quietly snuck straight to my room, not wanting to draw attention from my parents who were already in bed. I slipped off my clothes and slid into bed, exhausted. 2 days passed without much excitement, and I decided to walk to the shop to get some snacks, just to get out of the house for a bit. I pull on a pair of jeans and a shirt and begin looking for my coat within the mess on the floor. I find it by the side of my bed and begin to put it on when my hand hits against something firm in the pocket. "The book!" I whisper out loud as I remove it from my pocket, the curiosity reigniting inside me. I threw my coat back on the floor, sat at my desk, and opened it. It was a handwritten journal with the words, "Robert Palmer, 1987, scribbled on the inside cover in black ink. 17th February 1987, day 1 of 5. You'll have to excuse my rushed handwriting. I was informed when signing up for this trial that all outside communications are prohibited, so I'm discreetly jotting down in here to relieve some boredom and savor this oh-so-thrilling memory. I've put myself forward for a medical trial, I'm told it involves an injection today and 4 days of progress monitoring. Sounds dull, but I'm being given £2,000 just to lay in a hospital bed for a week, so I will grin and bear it. I'm on a shared ward with 2 other men and 3 ladies. It's peculiar for us to be mixed in the same ward, but we're all separated by curtains, so can't complain. The hospital have fed us a hearty lunch, and we're gradually being called to have our injections. 18th February 1987, day 2 of 5. The trial did not tell us the injection site was going to be in the eye. I protested, but I'd already signed a contract along with everyone else. We're now all sat in the ward with fucking eye patches on and feeling deceived. But I remind myself of the £2,000 and try to stay positive. I briefly interacted with the other participants in this shitty trial. The woman opposite me is called Linda, and the man next to me is Wendell. I have not yet caught the names of the others. 19th February 1987, day 3 of 5. I was woken at 6 in the morning to the woman in the first bed screaming. I heard nurses run in, and moments later it was silent, with the sounds of a bed being wheeled away. Linda and the woman next to her said they think she was sedated and taken away. Perhaps she had a mental breakdown? I still couldn't. I had to stop writing abruptly earlier as a nurse unexpectedly walked in. The man next to Wendell had pressed his emergency call button and explained to the nurse he felt hot and unwell. The nurse suddenly restrained the man to his bed hurriedly. The man began letting out an abnormal growl, and I heard the bed violently shaking as he was being wheeled away. What the fuck is this? 20th February, 1987, day 4 of 5. My writing will be scribbles. I'm shaking very hard. Myself, Wendell, and Linda are the only ones left on the ward. In the night, the woman next to Linda got out of bed and fled into the corridor to, what sounded like, primitively attack a nurse. She did not return. A man in a white coat came in to talk to us. He looked disappointed. He told us that the drugs trial has failed, and any negative effects are irreversible. He acted more like a stroppy toddler who didn't get his own way than a medical professional. Linda asked what this means for us. The bastard looked at her and shrugged. He told us the 3 other patients did not survive, and 1 nurse has also had to be destroyed due to contamination, but some of their organs will be transported to another facility for further testing. He then apologized and left. The 3 of us have been restrained to our beds. I have very limited movement in my hands. Engelsfield is not a hospital, it's a fucking experiment facility. There is no money, we are just lab rats. Our kin will receive news that we passed from a reaction to the medicine, and there can be no lawsuit as we signed away our rights. I doubt anyone will read this. I regret this. 21st February 1987, day 5 of 5. We lost Wendell in the early hours of last night. He told me he felt like he was burning before growling and shaking violently. We were left in the room with him for nearly 20 minutes, terrified he was going to break free of his restraints and harm us. Wendell managed to pull the curtain between us down. His eyes were fully black, and his mouth was wider than possible, and the demonic sounds he was emitting was haunting. The nurses ignored our pleas. If this is my fate, I'd rather just be put down now than go through that. But we were ignored, as if we'd been given up on now. It's getting late now. I'm feeling very hot. I don't know what to do. I closed the diary with wide eyes. Surely this must be a prank. But the book looked so aged that it was hard to convince myself it was a hoax. I opened my laptop and searched up Engelsfield Hospital. There were hardly any results, just that it suddenly closed due to unknown circumstances. I grabbed my phone and called Millie. She answered, and before she could finish her greeting, I told her everything I'd just read. Millie sounded genuinely concerned and reminded me of what we'd found in the fridge. She told me to call Harry. I obeyed, briefly hanging up on her to dial Harry's number. No answer. I try again. Nothing. I try several more times before calling Millie. "Oh, let's just go over to his," Millie insisted. "I'll meet you on his road in 10. Millie eventually jogged up to Harry's road to meet me. "He's probably just still asleep, but you've scared me now." Millie scolded me. All this talk of brains and demon zombie shit. We got to Harry's house and knocked on the door. No answer. We knock again, louder. Nothing. "Maybe they're out," I suggest, but Millie was already heading around the house to the back gate. I followed her. "All the cars are here," Millie told me. "Plus they know us well enough. They never mind when we let ourselves." Millie stopped in her tracks after turning the corner. I caught up to her and followed her gaze. The glass back door was completely smashed, and a large blood trail led off beyond the garden. I slowly walked closer to the door, Millie still frozen in fear. Just inside the door, I saw the faceless remains of Harry's mother. My jaw dropped, and I let out an audible gasp. This caused his mother to slowly distort her head to look at me. She weakly began to crawl towards me, her eyeless face searching for me, but her body barely able to move from being heavily stripped of flesh. I ran. I grabbed Millie firmly by the arm and ran. I didn't stop running until we were at mine. Without hesitation, I called the police and told them everything, Millie staring at me with unspoken horror. By the time investigators got to Inglesfield Hospital, it was ablaze. The amber flames dancing around everything that was left of the hospital. Harry's mother's remains were dealt with and cremated, along with his younger brother, who was found in a similar condition upstairs. Harry, his father and sister were never found. Midway through the year 2017, a friend and I decided to pack up a couple of things and head out to the nearby abandoned hospital that sat in the middle of town. The children's ward was definitely weird, but most of the hospital was gutted. I grabbed my camera, my laptop, and anything else I would need to capture any of the evidence that might happen that night. I grabbed everything and headed out to my friend's house to go pick him up. Once we were both ready, we headed out to the park to keep an eye out on the hospital for any police presence or anybody who might be watching. After a couple of hours, we noticed a couple of people walking towards the hospital. We decided to lay low, but noticed it was a couple of kids from the town who were also into the hospital. We met up with them and decided to set up a 3-man insertion team and a 2-man team to keep an eye out for anyone who might go around the area. We opened the window inside the horseshoe of the hospital, having only darkness as our protection. I stepped in with 2 of the people who showed up, while Cody and the other of the 3 stayed outside. Once inside, I locked the window to make sure that no one from the outside would be able to come in and fuck with us. We turned on our flashlights, and I hit record on my camera. Walking out of the room the window was in, we traveled through the maze of construction equipment and doorways leading to other rooms. Finally finding the staircase, we walked up to the 2nd floor and set all of my shit on the stretcher that sat in the middle of the reception area. Taking a look around, I remember the darkness, the silence that then slowly fell over the room. I've had this feeling before, and I don't really know how to explain it. I guess it could be described as my instincts, but I knew something was about to happen. Whether it was due to the darkness engulfing the entire hospital or the numbing silence, possibly both, honestly. When my phone began to ring, I knew something was wrong. Picking up the phone, I saw that it was my friend outside calling, so I answered and set the call to speaker. Midway through the year 2017, a friend and I decided to pack up a couple of things and head out to the nearby abandoned hospital that sat in the middle of town. The children's ward was definitely weird, but most of the hospital was gutted. I grabbed my camera, my laptop, and anything else I would need to capture any of the evidence that might happen that night. I grabbed everything and headed out to my friend's house to go pick him up. Once we were both ready, we headed out to the park to keep an eye out on the hospital for any police presence or anybody who might be watching. After a couple of hours, we noticed a couple of people walking towards the hospital. We decided to lay low, but noticed it was a couple of kids from the town who were also into the hospital. We met up with them and decided to set up a 3-man insertion team and a 2-man team to keep an eye out for anyone who might go around the area. We opened the window inside the horseshoe of the hospital, having only darkness as our protection. I stepped in with two of the people who showed up, while Cody and the other of the three stayed outside. Once inside, I locked the window to make sure that no one from the outside would be able to come in and fuck with us. We turned on our flashlights, and I hit record on my camera. Walking out of the room the window was in, we traveled through the maze of construction equipment and doorways leading to other rooms. Finally finding the staircase, we walked up to the second floor and set all of my shit on the stretcher that sat in the middle of the reception area. Taking a look around, I remember the darkness, the silence that then slowly fell over the room. I've had this feeling before, and I don't really know how to explain it. I guess it could be described as my instincts, but I knew something was about to happen. Whether it was due to the darkness engulfing the entire hospital or the numbing silence, possibly both, honestly. When my phone began to ring, I knew something was wrong. Picking up the phone, I saw that it was my friend outside calling, so I answered and set the call to speaker. "Yeah, man, what's up?" I spoke, taking a good look around me, with lights on now. I could see the window leading to the roof. I could see the open doorway with a tiny window on the right, and the hallway that led to the area of the child's doll I left for the little girl spirit that was then followed by the chapel area. "Dude, you guys have to get out of there right now. It isn't safe." I heard my friend almost scream. I sighed, knowing that when he was scared, all he wanted to do was run, no matter if we had just gotten there. Taking another look around, I didn't really take him seriously. I figured he just wanted to leave like normal. "Bro, we just set up. Why do we need to leave?" "We just saw 3 giant shadow people, about 8 feet each. One ran straight into the window you guys went in through, another jumped straight onto the roof, and the third jumped onto the second floor window, sat there for a bit, and just phased into the window." Now, of course, I didn't believe him. Why would I? I mean, 8-foot shadow people jumping into the hospital? How could anyone believe that shit? I went to tell him how I thought he was bullshitting, but before I could get anything else out, I heard the biggest bang I have ever heard come from right behind me. I turned around to see if the other two were fucking with me, but they were on either side of me as I turned. Looking at both of them, we nodded in agreement. "Yeah, fuck that. We are on our way." I instantly hung up and started to pack up everything I had just unpacked. I threw my bag on my shoulder and we began to run down the hallway back to the staircase. While descending the stairs, I felt a dark presence crawl on top of me, and I soon began to fall, deeper and deeper. I could feel myself start to be swallowed by the darkness of my own mind. I saw my childhood first, the cries of a baby, the sounds of flesh on wood, then against the wall, and soon the crushing of bones, being shattered into pieces. The pain was immense. First my skull, a migraine that felt as if an ice pick were working its way out of my head, my skin splitting, revealing the fresh, dark red blood. Next, 3 of my ribs, the sharp edge of the coffee table being slammed into my gut until 3 ribs on the right side of my body were completely destroyed, pieces in my lungs and in my stomach. After that came another rib, then another, and another. Breathing was difficult at this time. No matter how hard I tried, it felt as if, with each breath, my lungs were punctured by another piece of my ribs. Then came my collarbone, ripped apart from the inside. I could hardly move. That pain was so intense, I thought I would die right then and there. Finally, I could stand. I could see myself as an infant, in the hospital, recovering, bandages and casts covering my body. I can't believe someone would do this to a 4-month-old child. I heard the voice come from behind me. Turning around, I saw the 2 people who picked up the broken remains of the infant and put him back together. Now reaching inside their own chests, they both pulled out half of their own hearts, put them together, now its own full heart, slipping it inside that chest of the baby. I knew this child was me, and the 2 people soon became clear. I knew they were the 2 who adopted me, my new parents, the ones who saved me. I felt happy now. I wanted to hug them more than anything, to thank them for taking my pain away. Before I could move, though, I felt an overwhelming pain in my new heart. I looked over to see my sister Stephanie, beautiful as a teenager, very little cares in the world. I saw her slowly slipping away as the brain tumor grew in size, almost the shape of a baseball now. Finally, the image of my sister faded, and the darkness crept over me once more. I tried to look back over at my parents, but could see there was my mother, broken down on the ground, frustrated and overwhelmed. I saw my father laying in bed, his memory fading, and his body deteriorating. My father, who once saved me, now a frail, fragile shell of who he once was. I tried to scream. I tried with everything I had to tell him I loved him, but my words were drowned out by 2 gunshots. I looked to my right to find my younger brother laying on the ground in a pool of his own blood, the gun he had stolen from our mom and had used to end it all, still in his left hand. I saw my father, now nothing more than skin and bones, be put into the casket. It was so hard to say goodbye. So as he was put down into the ground, I felt my body jump down with him. The feeling of falling once again came over me. This time a light came from in front of me. As I fell closer and closer to the light, I felt the urge to puke, now being consumed by the light. I woke up on the ground, covered in sweat. I looked around and saw that I was outside, with everyone looking down at me. I looked back at the hospital, the window wide open. Just the memory of what happened was too much, so I got up and shut the window, locking it from the outside. I wiped off my forehead, my arm now covered in sweat. I turned back to them and nodded. We all started to head home, with the images of what happened in the hospital still on my mind. I knew that I will never go back to the hospital in Halstead, Kansas. I was born and raised in a little town called Maplewood, Pennsylvania. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and life was simple. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom ran the only grocery store in town. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. Growing up, I was just like any other kid, curious, always exploring the woods near our house, getting into trouble here and there. But what really got me were the stories the old folks in town would tell. Ghost stories, mostly. Haunted houses, creatures in the woods, that sort of thing. I loved hearing them, but I never really believed in any of it. Fast forward a few years, and I'm in my early 20s, trying to figure out what to do with my life. There weren't many jobs in Maplewood, so I ended up taking a job as a security guard at St. Mary's Hospital in the city. It was a pretty old building, built way back in the early 1900s. The place had history, that's for sure. The walls seemed to whisper secrets, and sometimes, late at night, you could hear strange noises echoing through the empty halls. I didn't pay much attention to it, though. I figured it was just the building settling, or maybe a rat scurrying around. My job was mostly uneventful. I worked the night shift, so it was pretty quiet. I'd make my rounds, check the doors, make sure everything was locked up. It wasn't exactly thrilling, but it paid the bills. Most nights, I was alone in those long, dimly lit corridors. The place had a way of playing tricks on your mind. The shadows seemed to move when you weren't looking, and sometimes I'd hear faint whispers, but I always shrugged it off. I told myself it was just the wind or my imagination. But then came that night. The night that changed everything. It was a cold, rainy night. One of those nights where the wind howls and the rain pelts against the windows like it's trying to get in. I was making my rounds, just like any other night when I heard it. A faint noise coming from one of the old, deserted wings of the hospital. The east wing, if I remember right. That part of the building hadn't been used in years, not since they'd moved most of the patients to the newer section. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else. It sounded like footsteps, slow and dragging, like someone was shuffling across the floor. My heart started pounding in my chest, but I told myself it was probably just a homeless person who'd somehow gotten inside. It wouldn't have been the first time. I followed the noise down the hallway, my flashlight barely cutting through the darkness. The air was cold, colder than it should have been, and there was this smell, like something rotten. When I turned the corner, I saw her. She was standing at the end of the hallway, her back to me. She was wearing a hospital gown, the kind they give patients, but something was off. Her legs were all wrong. They were bent backward, twisted in a way that shouldn't have been possible. I froze, my heart in my throat. For a moment, I thought it was just a trick of the light, or maybe I was seeing things. But then she turned around. I'll never forget what I saw. Her eyes, they were black, completely black, like there was nothing there but darkness. And that smile, it was twisted, unnatural, like her face had been stretched into a grin. But the worst part was the way she moved. She didn't walk, she ran, her twisted legs carrying her toward me faster than anything human should be able to move. I didn't think. I just turned and ran. I could hear her behind me, those awful, twisted legs slapping against the floor, but the sound was wrong, like bones breaking with each step. The lights flickered above me as I ran, and I could feel her getting closer, her breath cold against my neck. I wanted to look back, to see how close she was, but I knew if I did, I wouldn't make it out of there. I ran faster than I ever thought I could, my feet pounding against the tiles as I raced toward the main entrance. My lungs were burning, my legs felt like they were going to give out, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let her catch me. Just as I reached the doors, I heard a scream, a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream that echoed through the hallway. I don't know if it was her or me, but it was enough to push me through those doors and out into the cold night. The moment I crossed the threshold, everything went silent. The footsteps stopped, the lights stopped flickering, and the cold, oppressive feeling that had been pressing down on me vanished. I stood there, gasping for breath, staring back at the hospital. She was gone, but I knew she was still there, hiding in the shadows, waiting. I quit the next morning. Told my boss I couldn't do it anymore, and I packed up and went back to Maplewood. I never told anyone what happened that night, not really. I mean, who would believe me? But I can still feel her eyes on me, even now, like she's watching, waiting for the right moment to come back. I don't go back to the city much anymore, and I stay away from hospitals whenever I can. But every now and then, when the wind howls just right, or when I'm alone at night, I think about her, about what I saw, and about how close I came to never making it out of that hospital. And I wonder if she's still there, haunting those halls, waiting for the next poor soul to come across her path.